This
I
call
was
is
speaking
being
with a friend of
recorded.
mine today, and I was talking about Solera, and I said, the most amazing thing is that this product, for a lot of practitioners, is like an answer to prayer. And the reason that I said that, and I don't know that I've ever spoken about this on any of our calls to date, the reason I said that is that there's all kinds of herbal formulas and adaptogenic formulas out there in the marketplace, but most of them target just one area. So let's say you've got a person that's got a lot of stress in their life, and some of the things that are happening to them is that their cardiovascular system isn't working right, and they've got some difficulties controlling weight and diet, and they're not sleeping, and they're having bone density issues. You got to kind of get the picture because it's a little bit like the domino effect. Once you get stressed out in one area, then that's going to cascade to another area and then another area. And by the time they finally go and get help from their practitioner, most of us are looking at putting them on 6, 7, 8 different compounds in order to help rebalance the body systems to get that stress mechanism down from several different systems of the body. This is the only formula that I'm aware of that exists out there in the marketplace today that deals with all the biochemical pathways for stress. And even though, Rob, you and I haven't spoken about this, you do know that our fearless leader, Mark Priemer, a short time ago sent me a new accepted manuscript, which means it's accepted for publication, a study on the molecular mechanism of adaptogenic effects of herbal extracts on isolated brain cells. Now, this is a heavy duty publication, and next week I want to talk about it. And there's a whole bunch of things that's very exciting about this particular publication. But if you were to go and pick up PDR, physician's desk reference on medicines, and you would look up a particular compound, and it would say, well, the mechanism of action isn't really known, but it's thought to do yada yada yada. This actually gives us the mechanism of action in the biochemistry of the human brain for a number of the herbs that are in Solera. And it's meaty reading. And of course, a lot of people like to read novels when they go to bed. This is the kind of stuff I cut my teeth on. I love every minute of it. And so I've been studying it for a while. And I'm kind of anxious to share that in one of our calls um, because I think it it is really wonderful to finally be in a time where we can sit down and say, look, there is this thing called God's pharmacy, and it grows out there in nature, and it's always been growing out there in nature. It was here during the dinosaur age. It was here, whatever age you want to talk about, herbs were always provided, and animals and people learned over time what to use to help maintain themselves, to help correct themselves. But lots of times the mechanism of action isn't always known. We sometimes know that there's vitamins or there's flavonoids or there's antioxidants. We know some of the components, but proving the mechanism of action, especially in brain chemistry, is pretty amazing for any compound, be that natural or pharmaceutical. I'm amped up about it. You guys couldn't tell, could you? Tonight we're going to talk about an old favorite, Crataegus oxyacantha, which is more commonly known as hawthorn. And hawthorn's, one of those really interesting, it comes in sort of a shrub form, and it comes in a great big tree form. And it's got a lot of other names, May blossom, May apple. It's known as English hawthorn, white thorn, May bush. It has many names, and it's very interesting when you study the ancient history of some of these herbs. This plant, one time was considered sacred, sacred beyond almost all other plants, because this is where the crown of thorns came from when Jesus did his march up the hill carrying the cross. It's a very interesting plant and a very interesting wood, and in fact, per ounce or per pound, it produces the greatest amount of heat of any wood known to mankind. It even exceeds the mighty oak. And because of that, over time, the charcoal was used to do a lot of industrial applications because it would literally melt metals and do other things that other plants, source woods couldn't do without the addition of other chemicals. Now, it's pretty well known. Hawthorn is known as the heart herb, and it's been known that way for hundreds of years. And there are lots and lots and lots of studies. We do know that in general, it improves the healthy functioning of the heart muscle itself. It helps promote overall balance and harmony and health to the whole cardiovascular system. And it contains some very interesting antioxidants. It was used hundreds of years ago for the heart, and today it's still currently used to relieve heart stress. And in fact, in the United States, since the early 1800s, doctors were using this herb for relieving respiratory illnesses, circulatory disorders, and heart irregularities. Now, like all herbs, there are different parts of the plant that are used. So in the case of hawthorn, they can use the flowers, they can use the leaves, or they can use the fruits. And the fruits are a very teeny tiny bright red berry, hence one of its names, thorn apple, because if you look at it under a microscope or even a magnifying glass, it looks like a little baby apple. And it has some interesting, depending upon which part you use, it can have a very sweet taste or it can have a very sour taste. Now, the most unusual or the most usual application of this herb has been always in extracted form, and there are two components of this herb in the extracted form that science looks for to verify the standardization. What does that mean? It means that there are certain components in there that they know are really, really good for your heart. And so when they do an extract, which is, sometimes done with alcohol, sometimes done with glycerin. In the case of hawthorn, you can't make an extract with alcohol very well at all. It has to be done with water, which is even better in my opinion. And these two compounds that they're looking for when they standardize it are because they strengthen the heart muscle itself and they promote circulation. And in fact, if you looked up in any of the current herbal books or online, you would clearly find that any kind of weakened circulatory system problem, especially if you had restricted circulation to the peripheral areas, the hands, the feet, the lower leg, the lower arm, and sometimes even the brain, this would be the king herb to use. When it's combined with things like ginkgo biloba, it has been shown to be very beneficial in increasing cerebral circulation, i.e. your brain, and also because it increases circulation in the blood vessels in the brain, it's also coupled with ginkgo again, been shown to improve short-term memory and some of the symptoms and signs of dementia. It's also really good in the fruit especially has been shown to be useful when we have tightness in the chest or chest pains, heart failure, and hardening of the arteries. We're not talking out of school here. It's really important to understand that there are numerous studies that verify all the things that I'm telling you about. Now, that said, if you're going to go out and try to work with some of these components, if you're on prescription medications, make sure that you're not playing doctor, that you work with a healthcare professional, because, medications and herbs can be counterindicated usually because they can make medicine work not quite as good or too good. So we don't have that worry about our Solera extract because of the guy who created it, all the testing that's been done with it. But, I'm a person that believes always consult with your healthcare provider if you're on medications or you have special issues that you're dealing with, to make sure that you're adding the right things to the protocol that you're working with your body. Now, one of the things that hawthorn contains is something called proanthocyanins. Most of us know about that, PCOs. It's a very powerful antioxidant. In the study that I was referring to earlier, there was some very interesting data about these proanthocyanins and their ability to neutralize what are called oxygen radicals. Oxygen radicals do probably the most damage of any free radical that is naturally produced from certain processes in the human body. And your body comes fully programmed to produce internal antioxidants to deal with those processes. But as we get stressed out, as our pH becomes irregular from high blood sugar, too much stress, too much coffee, not enough water, too much sugar, and the list goes on, well, then things change and we can actually increase the amount of these oxygen radicals faster than our bodies can actually produce the good stuff to neutralize that reaction. And indeed, it's one of those types of reactions that can cause one of the manyest types of heart attacks. Flavonoids. Flavonoids we've talked about a lot. They're really good for the overall body. They serve as an antioxidant. They're natural anti-inflammatories. There's a whole group of them. Most plants have several forms of flavonoids in them. One of their great capabilities is to maintain the elasticity of the blood vessel and arterial wall. This is a big thing. Think of the tires on your car. It holds the road really good when you got 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 miles. But when you start getting up into that 30,000 to 50,000 mile range on tires, and there are tires that'll go that long, but as they get closer to their expiration time or miles, well, they get worn, they get smooth, they get thin, they get brittle, and there can be a blowout. Welcome to the world of heart attacks and strokes. This is what literally happens to our blood vessels as we age, and I don't necessarily mean age chronologically, because medications that we take, diet, lack of exercise, too much stress, blood sugar regulation can actually cause our circulatory system to age more rapidly than the years that we have on our bodies. And so they become thinner, they become dried and less flexible. And one of the first signs of this is that we start to have a little bit of blood pressure problems. And blood pressure problems are not always just hypertension. In other words, our blood pressure goes up. But sometimes as the aging process happens in certain blood vessels in our body and it becomes dried out and they shrink due to lack of flexibility, we can also have hypotension. And trust me, hypotension isn't any better for you. And in fact, in some ways, it's actually worse than hypertension. So Hawthorne then has been long known to resupply these flavonoids to help maintain and nourish the blood vessel wall so that it maintains its subtle ability to expand and contract without breaking and to prevent it from looking like paint that's too old and chipping off the side of the house. It's really pretty neat. One of the real interesting things about Hawthorne is its ability to enhance capacity for exercise. Enhance capacity for exercise. This is kind of important. Many of us who've been bicyclers and runners and skiers and mountain climbers, as we get older, we can have this impact where when we go out and exercise as hard as we used to, even if we're even only in our late 30s or even late 40s, all of a sudden we notice that we can't push it as hard, we can get lightheaded, our recovery time slows down, and this really can kind of go back to the fact that vascular wall has lost some of its flexibility. And we make this great demand by fueling up the system, working the muscle, burning through the fuel. Well, guess what? Those blood vessels not only carry in all the oxygen, carry away carbon dioxide, the metabolic waste of using our oxygen, but they also carry all of these nutrients to fuel the muscle, to deal with the lactic acid buildup. And that's not only just the muscles that make us walk around, but your heart is probably one of the fanciest muscles you've got in your whole body. So they have studied Hawthorne a great deal for its capacity to improve your ability to exercise, and it also helps to get rid of shortness of breath and fatigue that's associated with pushing yourself a bit hard. Um, Stress is one of the most interesting things that we all kind of know about. We've all been there, we've all experienced, we all have stress coping mechanisms. Some people it's a glass of wine, some people it's a chocolate bar. There's a variety of things that we do to try and calm ourselves down when we're stressed out. The unfortunate part about much of that is that it only temporarily alleviates the stress in that moment for half hour, an hour, maybe two. And so what happens is we tend to do more and more of that stress coping mechanism, but we're treating the symptom and we're not getting to the underlying cause. And the underlying cause is definitely biochemical. And so what we need then is a formulation that talks to the systems of the body that regulate stress. And that starts upstairs, but it's not just limited to the brain. There's a lot of stress mechanisms that happen in the lower body. We've talked about this a little bit vis-a-vis cortisol production by the adrenal glands. There's a very interesting study that was published in Phytomedicine, the International Journal of Phytotherapy and Phytopharmacology. And the study was done again, this particular one, again, around exercise. And what they found in this particular study was that as we work harder and harder, go to higher altitudes or deeper altitudes, as in the case of scuba diving, that the scavenging molecules, superoxide and hydroxyl and peroxyl radicals, increased. And when subjects were given Hawthorne extract in advance of their workout, they found that the production of the superoxide, the hydroxyl, and peroxyl radicals diminished remarkably because the Hawthorne was able to basically gather it up and break it down into usable material over and over again, preventing a lot of the side effects that can happen when those guys are built up in the body. As we mentioned before, the respiratory issues that many people deal with, allergies are becoming so much more common today than they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. Some of that is, the pollution in the environment. I mean, we all know it. There's it's a world population now. It's hard to imagine when you live in United States of America or Western Europe, where we have good water, good sewer systems, good garbage systems, and collection systems, that there is a huge amount of this world that's still burning their garbage. I'm talking about plastic. I'm talking about tires. I'm talking about human feces. I'm talking about fabrics. I mean, there's a huge part of the world today that burns all of their trash. Now, when we were in general a small population across the board in every country, it really didn't amount to much, even though it was going on, and perhaps even more then than now. But because there weren't as many people and it hadn't been going on for so long, it really hadn't demonstrated a cumulative effect in the environment. We're now learning that these very toxins that come from that and other things, boats and planes and trains and cars and insecticides and pesticides, herbicides, colorants, artificial flavor, the list goes on. We're now realizing that in the natural environment, these kinds of toxins accumulate in the plants, and the plants begin to not only produce more pollens, but the pollens they're producing are contaminated with these toxins. And that's why so many people who've fought allergies all their life are having a rougher time, and why people who are not naturally prone to having allergies are beginning to experience allergies. So one of the things that can really help is Hawthorne. And I really expect that once this product is out there and we start hearing from all of you the benefits, we're going to see, because of the Hawthorne component, that we are seeing people get benefit and have less reactivity to so many of the allergens in our environment. One of the interesting compounds of Hawthorne is a flavonoid called quercetin. Now, if you fought allergies at all in your life, there has been out there in the open marketplace for quite a bit of time a number of quercetin type formulas, quercetin and nettles, quercetin and phygeum, and they've well been used by many, many folks to improve their resistance to environmental allergies. Well, here we have it naturally occurring in our hawthorn. And there's actually three different types of quercetin. There's, I think, 12 altogether, and we'll probably find a few more as more and more and more science marches into the phytoceutical and phytopharmacology studies of herbs and the active components. Another one that it contains is called Vitexin, Vitexin. Vitexin is extremely important for the cardiovascular heart strength. Now, one of the things that it actually does, and there's kind of a little bit of a conversion that goes on here, the Vitexin can actually increase in the heart muscle itself ATP, which is 90% of your body's energy source of 90% of your cells. That's what the mitochondria do, is they produce this compound, and it's that compound that gives us energy. And over time, as we get older, we produce less and less of this. And some scientists actually believe that it is the reduced production of ATP that starts the downhill slide in aging. We forget that in that first 20 minutes of sleep every night to 2 hours, that this is when the lion's share of all of the healing and regeneration occur in the animal body. And you know what? It's like any other budget. You get up and, you say to your body, I got to get to work. The kids got to go to the football game tonight, PTA, blah, blah, blah. You're running around, and whether you know it or not, you're saying to your brain, okay, listen, from today's energy budget, these are the things we have to get done. Well, by the end of the day, the budget's almost exhausted. And we go to bed at night, and the resources that we need for that regeneration just aren't there. And that begins to show its effect in the formation of wrinkles, the change of the texture of your skin, hair color, hair texture, short-term memory, visual disturbances. All of these things are supposedly the beginning of the aging process. Well, there's an awful lot of belief out there that if we can improve circulation, improve heart strength, help the body be better balanced against allergens that are floating around in the air and therefore in the water and therefore in the food, therefore in our bodies, if we can protect ourselves a bit better from that, it is truly believed that there isn't any reason today why people couldn't live and maintain super healthy function well into their hundreds. Think about that. I mean, I don't mind being here when I'm 150 as long as I can still go out and work in my garden, my greenhouse, and take care of myself in my own home and do my work. Well, what we're learning now about hawthorn is, because of the Vitexin, that there is a possibility of yet another avenue of improving the body's cellular energy. This is pretty doggone significant. In addition to that, there's some other compounds that are well known. Triamine is one of them. Phenylethylamine is another one. That's a secondary step from the amino acid phenylalanine, which is an energy up, but too much of that can cause problems. Phenylalanine, that is. Phenylethylamine, not. These compounds are being aggressively studied today, and they're being studied in angina. They're being studied in the aging population for circulation of the brain and memory. They're being studied in congestive heart. They're being studied in high blood pressure and low blood pressure. And the clinical findings of some of these studies are nothing short of amazing. And many of these studies are double-blind placebo studies involving 400, 800, 1,000 people over a period of 1 to 3 years. So the data is pretty strong. It's pretty strong. The more I look in on the anti-aging dating, and I'm going to be 71 next month, so this anti-aging data is really important to me. Anti-aging is another thing that hawthorn is being studied for, especially in age-related cardiovascular diseases. One of the studies that is very intriguing was done on people with diabetes and also heart issues. And they found that by giving, and they did several groups and they did several volumes of the amount of the extract that was given. But they found that the diabetic person with heart issues benefited greatly in rebalancing not only their blood pressure, but in heart strength tests and in circulation to the peripheral areas. You're all aware, if you've ever been around anyone with diabetes, if they drop something heavy on a toe or a finger, the risk is very high for gangrene and amputation. And so with so many people now worldwide being predicted to have to fight type 2 diabetes and how much it's costing nations to be able to do this, and the expense is just ginormous. So many zeros that it's hard to compute in my brain pan. That these types of studies are becoming stronger and better, and there's more and more data coming out all of the time. So we get to look forward to the future of seeing the kind of effects that our Solera has, and we can't make any claims just because we've got Hawthorne in there that we're going to get all of those benefits. But we can talk about what science has found, and we can talk about what's been traditionally true. You know, I doubt that if a lot of the medicines that we see prevalent in the world today are still going to be here in 1 century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries, 4 centuries, and yet herbs have been here that long and longer. And sometimes when we just take even a small amount on a regular basis, it's amazing how supportive that can be to our personal health goals, both current and long term. I think that we've grown up a little bit. I think we're finally figuring out that each of us needs to be a very active player in the maintenance of our own health. And in the process of doing that, when we do have to end up and go to the doctor, we actually are presenting him overall a better body to work on, so the outcomes overall will be better. I really love this plant. I've taken Hawthorne for years. You know, Rob, I started adding up all of the things that I can either reduce or eliminate that I currently take to support my health. And Solera is already going to be paid for just in what I don't have to take anymore. And that's always a great realization. I'll hand it back to you, buddy. Thanks so much for letting me talk tonight.
Okay, thank you so much, Rena. That's some powerful information there for heart health, energy, anti-aging. Wow, is all I can say.